So yeah, I'm just gonna start off here by just touching on what that previous panel we're talking about as well in terms of the hex and the gatekeeping and all that type of stuff. Because that type of like that talk kind of resonated with me because that was one of the reasons that got me into hex as well. Was I think I was watching this YouTube channel and someone was essentially just saying like I don't know, just talking one bad thing about the top 100 cryptos or something, and it might even been like might have just been like the top cryptos in general. I don't know if it had anything to do with the top 100, but long story short, um, the guy mentioned hex at the very end of the video, and then his I guess his negative take on hex was that it's not listed anywhere. And I was like, that's interesting. Like, well, why isn't this hex token listed anywhere? So that's kind of what got me into the whole hex ecosystem and everything like that. And I think that'll tie into the conversation here of hex to, I think it's hex bulls only. And we'll do show you guys kind of what I'm looking at. I'll talk a little bit about like I think the journey of hex, where hex started, where hex is now, and kind of the what I think even the future of hex could possibly be. So if you guys aren't already aware, hex, and I might share my screen here just because I think it's definitely worth pulling up the chart. See if yeah, there we go. So yeah, we'll talk about kind of where hex started and everything like that. So just like I was saying, like hex was one of these, I think it was and it still is one of these probably gate kept, and it might be a little bit kind of I think it's definitely a lot more mainstream as it started to run up a little bit, but I don't know if it's as mainstream as Bitcoin or Ethereum. Although I do think if you are in the the DeFi vicinity, you have known about hex and you probably have heard about hex. So keep in mind, like this ticker has done, and I don't know if this chart shows the full 1,000,000%, just because I think might be missing some of the wick highs and stuff. But I mean, this one draws up a ton. So keep that in mind. Is like even with hex, people, and I think they were talking about it on the panel, but people were talking about how 1 penny was this like kind of impossible, far-fetched, impossible price target. And even today hex is sitting above, it's pretty much sitting above 1 penny, right? And then from that previous all-time high, it ran all the way up to 55 pennies, right? So I'm not sure anyone necessarily knows exactly, like I don't know if anyone has a crystal ball and knows exactly what's going to happen to any of these cryptos. But what I will say too, and I might just do just a little bit of moon math here real quick, but what I will say is hex has been one of the top performers here on PulseChain, especially given the RH core tickers. You can see how much it's currently up. So it's currently up 90% versus Pulse, and it's actually from its low to its high, or at least its local low to its high. It's up over 266% against Pulse in its ratio, right? So I actually built one of these Hart's law calculators that will take the pair address of hex. So this is the pair address of hex, essentially WPLS. You're able to kind of take this X factor, which is kind of what you're seeing here on the chart. So looking at how much hex has outperformed Pulse, and we're just going to keep it simple and just say a 2x, right? Because I think hex can go up potentially even more than a 2x versus PulseChain. But you can see in the previous like history, like I mean that's up almost a 3x. That went up almost over a 2x here. That's 100% move, which is basically a 2x. So we'll say a 2x factor, and then the paired token price, that's essentially WPLS, And keep in mind, we talk about, like, I think Rich just talked about Hart's Law, where you have, you have your two crypto assets paired together. And if one crypto asset moves up, if no one trades in that pair, the other one will kind of get brought up in value through Hart's Law. So that's kind of what we're taking a look at here is like if PLS moves, it's going to bring HEX up. And then on top of that, there's actually a good chance that people might even swap PLS for HEX, causing HEX to outperform. And that's kind of what this calculator is taking a look at as well. So we'll do a few conservative options of like for like PLS growth, and then that'll also kind of dictate the HEX growth as well. But here's a 10x, 2x factor for HEX. Basically, that means that you can read it here. Essentially, HEX is outperforming Pulse by a 2x. You can see the current ratio here. That's basically the same ratio that we get here on the DEX screener. And you can see where that puts the HEX price, right at 22 cents, which, keep in mind, that's only off of a 10x on PLS and a 2x over that, right? So you could say this is a little conservative. Like if RH is shooting for the glory and trying to, I guess, like we're here for the moon and everything, we'll crank this up a little bit and we'll do it in, like, I guess, chunks here. But say like a 25x, right? And this is only with HEX outperforming by a double. You essentially get a 54-cent HEX, right? 54-cent HEX, which that just about breaks your all-time high. And that's if Pulse does a 25x approximately. So let's start to crank this up a little more. Like, let's put a 40x here. You can see that puts HEX over here at over 87 cents. So now we're getting close to that dollar region. And you can keep, like, here's the calculation assumptions here. So Pulse will reach, this is about 20x the SAC rate. And then if HEX outperforms by 2x, like, you get 87 cents. And I guess kind of what I'm trying to do here is show you guys how, and I think the previous panel even touched on it quite well, was like crypto can go way higher than you could ever imagine. And yes, of course, it can also go way lower than you could ever imagine as well. But I think the point is like one day, or it doesn't even have to be one day, but I think there will be a time where these tickers start to move and the price will start to run away from you. And just kind of the example we brought up where the 1 cent sort of price target for HEX seemed like this unreachable, kind of like far-fetched, it's never going to get there type of move. People might look at 87 cents, or even let's do like a more, not conservative, a more bullish estimate, like even here $1.75. People will look at this and say, that's not going to happen. That's way too far-fetched. Like HEX it's down so much. But I think in reality, it's possible. And even with some of these numbers, like, it doesn't even have to be that extreme, right? Like that's basically Pulse reaching a 40x the SAC price, and then HEX doing a 2x over it gives you $1.74. So keep that in mind. Is it doesn't take a ton of economic energy to move these things. Another thing I'll bring up, and I think I've brought up this simulator before too, but keep in mind, people might also ask, like, why would the price ever move like that? Like, why would the price ever, like, this calculation depends on, it depends a little bit on PLS going to 40x a SAC rate. So if someone asks, like, why would PLS ever do that? And like maybe here I'll give just like a simple example of like how that might even be possible just based off the math in the AMMs and stuff. But here, this is just I'm saying just, but it's still like quite a hefty buy. But this is $200 million buy, and you can see that appreciates the price by 400x. So keep in mind, we only need about a 40x from the SAC rate to make this calculation work. This is already a 400x, and that's not even, I don't even think that's like a quarter of the reserve, right? It's probably less than a quarter of the reserve. And like even here, we'll add some sell pressure and we'll recalculate and see what happens. But even with the sell pressure, you get 180x on the pulse price, right? So let me do that real quick here, and we'll say 180x on the pulse price. And let's just say this does, like it outperforms it by 50%. This is basically saying. So you can see where that puts HEX, $2.94. So also remembering what I said when I basically when I was saying, and like even with what the previous panel was saying, when like HEX came out, you had all these guys kind of just dreaming for at least 1 penny, right? And that seemed like super far-fetched, super kind of insane. And then by the time it happened, right, it kept going and it hit 50 pennies. So that same sort of logic might even be able to be applied to this, right? Where HEX can, like these numbers, they seem far-fetched and pretty impossible, but it can run up. And we've been showing you guys how, even with some sell pressure and like $200 million, which keep in mind the Treasury is 800 million currently, like you can still pull these kind of crazy numbers out. And especially kind of given Richard and his, I think he said he's doing it for glory, and just because, like number 2 isn't as appreciated as number 1. So I do think he wants, to have his number 1 assets and number 1 tokens, number 1 charts, number 1 everything, right? So that's kind of how I kind of look at the whole HEX ecosystem and stuff. And it is like HEX is unique, right? And I think there has been probably some copycats that have tried to, I don't know, replicate it in some way. But for the most part, like there's not really a product like HEX, especially keeping in mind that how much was raised for PulseChain and PulseX and all those different things to all support HEX, right? Like that's one of the core, I think one of the core things that, PulseChain was kind of brought into existence for, was to save the users from those hefty ETH fees that were kind of chopping up HEX users a little bit. So keep that in mind in terms of like, like yes, some of the prices do seem far-fetched, but even like let's do $100 million buy into POS here. I mean, that gives you your 49x with 35% sell pressure, right? So yes, the numbers can seem far-fetched, but when you do kind of break it down and you look at it in terms of like, if this, then that, then this, in a way, because you can sort of, the blockchain is all code, right? So you can look at like an action and then a reaction, right? You can prove this stuff with the code on the chain, which is I think which is actually what we've done with a lot of these tools, right? So taking a look at, these calculations, plugging in the 49x into here, and we'll do an example here with 49x, and then just seeing like a simple, X factor, and that still gives you an 80x for HEX, right? So keep that in mind, is like, yes, some of these price targets can look a little far-fetched, but I do think that and we'll do another example here, but I do think that there is some kind of reason behind them and stuff. And maybe this will be the last thing I do before might have to wrap up here, but take a look at this. So if we do even, I'm not sure if this is an even split, but essentially splitting $200 million in the HEX, $200 million in the Pulse. HEX does a 10,000x here to $114, right? PulseX does about 1,000x. All these other coins do about 1,000x. So keep that in mind. It's like, yes, these numbers do look far-fetched, but I mean, we just have this reserve hitting a new all-time high today, and then you guys can see the numbers here. It's like you don't even have to use up nearly the whole reserve, not even close, right? And you pull a 10,000x out of these tokens. So yeah, that's kind of my HEX bull talk. I'm not sure if I'm fully running out of time here, but Yeah, maybe I'll riff on a few other things here until Max jumps back in. But let's take a look at the chart here as well. I think I brought this up earlier in terms of HEX being one of it's essentially one of the stronger RH tickers, or at least it has been in this recent market period. And I'll show you guys why I say this as well. So here, I'll kind of what I and I'll pull up some other charts. I just I don't know if I don't know how messy or not these will be on this computer, but you can kind of see pretty much the structure on this chart. Like you had the initial sort of run up, you had a retracement. Now we've made a new all-time high on this chart. And then yes, we had a little bit of a retracement, but you can also see here, like on this retrace, it did retrace essentially in a higher zone than it bottomed last time. So long story short is it is making these higher lows against PLS. So HEX looks pretty strong, and maybe I won't compare other charts like that, but I'll go take a look at it in terms of a few other pairs. Like let's take a look at it versus incentive. I don't know if I've fully done this, but yeah, it looks pretty good here. So keep in mind this is HEX versus incentive. You can actually see during the early days of PulseChain, this is HEX outperforming INC. And then yes, you had a retracement, but it does look like you start to have another run up. Like that's over a 550% move versus HEX, or sorry, versus Inc here, like HEX outperforming Inc. And then even if we look at it from this current local low to where we are now, like you're up 81% versus incentive. So HEX, I think it definitely looks like one of the at least one of the core market leaders here. Check out versus PulseX as well. All right. Let me turn this on the PLX chart. This one too, I don't know if it shows as much strength as the PLS chart, but it does show a lot of strength for HEX here. Like that's HEX outperforming PLSX by 261%, even as of recently as well. And I think this is one of the key points I want to drive home. But as of recently, like this is the trend of HEX on a lot of its key pairs is, HEX is moving up. Like it has been starting to outperform against even some of these other RH tickers. But here, taking a look at this ratio, if you had purchased in essentially June of 2025, this chart rode up almost 70%. And even if you're taking a look at today, like you're still up 30% here versus PulseX, right? So we'll see what happens with this. I know PulseX has also been one of the stronger RH tickers too, but HEX, especially in the short term, I think it has kind of taken the lead here on some of its pairings, even with some of these other core RH tickers. So